Hello, everyone. This is Gerald Celente, and we have with us again, very honored, and privileged to have with us Judge Andrew Napolitano, because nobody says what you say with the authority and judicial background to put things into perspective of what this country is, what it was, and where it's going in terms of the Constitution, our freedom. And it's very heartbreaking with the latest article that you just wrote. And it's called Bloody Gina and Her Team of Torturers. Last week at a pretrial hearing at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, the naval base, for Abd al-Ram el-Nashari, you could pronounce it correctly, a Saudi, who was charged with being the mastermind of the attack on the USS Cole in 2000, at which 17 American sailors were killed. A psychologist in charge of interrogating Nashari described in vivid detail both the modern and medieval techniques of torture used upon him. And you go on to mention that the person that became the top CIA,
the director of the CIA, was the lead torturer, a woman named Gina Haspel, nicknamed by her colleagues Bloody Gina. So listen, all those who know me know that my favorite dog in my whole life was named Gina. I'm not talking about the dog. I'm talking about Bloody Gina. I'm talking about Gina Haspel, who we now know. This is very unusual for this to happen, Gerald. When this psychologist last week was called by a defense witness, the interrogators called by the defense to demonstrate to the judge that the evidence that the government wants to introduce against this guy, Nashiri, was obtained by torture. And they had him described in detail, and I'll spare our viewers the gut-wrenching details, except for one, of what they did to him. In doing that, he either intentionally or unintentionally let it slip who the chief torturer was, and that's Gina Haspel. This is 2002. This is in Thailand. Very significant where it is. I'll get to it in a minute. She's the head of the CIA station in Thailand and was the head of the team perpetrating the torture and wrote detailed memos, which are now declassified for the most part. You can get them online, back to her bosses in Langley. So this is the first time we've heard under oath by a person who participated in the torture that it was approved by the highest levels of the CIA and named the person who was in charge of it, who would go on to become the director of the CIA. Torture is a federal crime if committed on a person who's in custody, punishable by 20 years in jail. So this is the first time we know that a CIA director, probably not the first time it happened, but it's the first time we know about it, committed felonies earlier in her career. Now, what do we care? Why do we care about Nashiri? Because if the government can torture him and learn at the end of the torture, he said the same things under torture that he told them ahead of time, but they didn't believe him because they wanted to inflict pain and misery on him. If the government can do that, then there isn't any restraint on the government whatsoever. Now, just to finish this story, the statute of limitations for torture is 8 years. This torture occurred in 2002. I am sure that the psychologist was aware of that when he admitted that he was part of the team and Bloody Gina was. But they have not escaped all prosecutors, because the International Criminal Court in The Hague, to which Thailand is a member, because the torture took place in Thailand, characterizes torture as a war crime. No statute of limitations and no executive pardons recognized. Meaning, if these torturers, whose names are now out in public, go to a country where the court is recognized, they can be arrested, indicted, and prosecuted. By the way, who recognizes the court? All countries in the world except for North Korea, China, Russia, and the United States. What a club.
Killer club.
Yes.
You know, you mentioned they call her Bloody Gina. You know, I keep hearing they always blame. It's just, if only women were in charge.
Oh, God.
You know, I'm so sick of that. I don't care if it's white, black, green, yellow, men, women, good and bad come in all of them.
Yes.
You look at the track record of the women in charge. Hillary Clinton, how'd you feel when you heard Muammar Gaddafi was killed? We came, we saw, he died. Madeleine Albright, they asked her, is the price of 500,000 Iraqi children under the age of 5 worth the sanctions and the war that Bill Clinton committed when she was on 60 Minutes with Leslie Stahl? She said, yes, the price is worth it. And you write about this. Her team calls her Bloody Gina. The people in the CIA, right?
Yes. Now, she was appointed by Trump and Senator Feinstein. Not a fan of this show or of you or me, but, you know, even a stopped clock is right twice a day, is terrific on the subject of torture. Senator Feinstein of California is the one who put into the public record of the Senate the 6,000 pages that the Senate Intelligence Committee staff had uncovered of the tortures that George Bush authorized. George Bush personally asked her not to. Barack Obama personally asked her not to. John McCain said, because he's a victim of torture, put it in there, and if you don't, Diane, I will. Anyway, she's interrogating Haspel, who was up for Senate confirmation to be the head of the CIA. If she had asked just 2 more questions, or if she had known what we now know, then Bloody Gina would never have been confirmed.
Yeah. You go on also to mention here that most judges would have dismissed the charges against the defendant for such criminal behavior.
Oh, let me tell you why. Without even getting to the torture, this guy's been waiting for trial for 14 years. 14 years. Isn't there a speedy trial clause in the Constitution? Yes. Does it pertain to Cuba? Yes. Here's why he's been waiting for trial for 14 years. He's on his second defense team. The defense team is civilians and military. The first team quit. Why did they quit? Because the feds bugged their communications with their translator and with their client. Most federal judges and state judges, learning that the government did that to the defense team, would dismiss the charges against the defendant. But this is Guantanamo Bay, where the prosecutors and the judge have the same boss, the Secretary of Defense. And so sometimes due process gets watered down. It's terrible. Just terrible. And the torturing of this guy initially was on the basis of anonymous tips. Anonymous tips.
You know, you mentioned also that cost us, it's spending $500 million a year
to keep Gitmo open. There's only 37 prisoners there now. When Gitmo was first opened, you and I were criticized for condemning the concept of a Devil's Island. Supreme Court agreed with us. The Bush administration lost 5 out of 6 Supreme Court cases, and the 6th had to do with where a person was physically going to be tried. But all the cases where they tried to argue the Constitution doesn't apply, the laws don't apply, federal judges don't apply, the Supreme Court shot them down. You and I argued that the whole thing was illicit, and the 9/11 people and whoever else they gathered up, like this person, Nashiri, should be tried in federal court. If that had happened, all of this would have been over with 10 years ago. Gitmo would have been closed. Instead, they're spending $500 million a year to keep it open, and they continue to trash the Constitution as they do so. Every president, from George W. to the present one, Obama, to his credit, tried to close it. Congress enacted legislation that barred him from doing so. Trump boasted about it, said torture works. We should put people from the streets of New York down in Gitmo. I assume it was typical bravado and exaggerating by him. But it's still there. It's still a Devil's Island. It's still costing a fortune. It still trashes the Constitution. And people like Bloody Gina get to walk free.
And there, there's another element to it. we have no right being down there. Cuba's not our country.
Correct.
You know,
That's
the
where
other
I
part,
just,
the other part of this is that what it's going on what now 20 almost what 20 years down there.
yes.
So you said $500 million, so that's $10 billion we spent.
Yeah.
$10 billion as the infrastructure of this country is rotting away. And again, this is barely any news at all. And an interesting fact in here, by the way, right in your first paragraph, you say this guy Nashiri was a Saudi.
Yes.
Yeah, wasn't
Where did he get the money? And where did he get the explosives sufficient to blow a hole the size of a baseball diamond in the side of an American ship? Where did he get that from? Well, we can guess, and it would be an educated guess where he got it from. The same creeps that Joe Biden is about to meet with in the next couple of weeks. Not the same human beings. This character that runs the Saudi government was a child at the time, but the same culture, the same family, the same group, the same people that dispatched 19 murderers to take down the World Trade Center and attack the Pentagon. And they're still our friends. The same people that slaughtered Khashoggi, the reporter for the Washington Post, cut him up into pieces while they played classical music in the background, and they're still our friends.
Again, that's why I pointed it out. You know, how come they, you know, what was it allegedly, 15 of the 19 people on those planes were Saudis on 9/11, as the story goes?
I think it was 19 of the 20, and the 20th, of course.
Anyway, how come we
number.
invaded Afghanistan and not Saudi Arabia? The hypocrisy, the sickness. And that's what this article is really brings it down to. You know, what kind of country are we living in and how sad it's become?
The government recognizes no limitation on its power. If this government can torture a human being and then boast about it, it recognizes no limitation on its